Four best Halloween horror stories. Every year, when Halloween comes, the small village of Maplewood is bustling with pumpkin lanterns, houses decorated with fake cobwebs and creepy skeletons. Children dress up as ghosts, knocking on doors, shouting trick or treat to ask for candy. However, not everyone knows the legend of Jack-o'-lantern, a cursed spirit who only appears on Halloween night to take revenge on those who dare to tease his fate. Every year, when Halloween comes, the small village of Maplewood is bustling with pumpkin lanterns, houses decorated with fake cobwebs and creepy skeletons. Children dress up as ghosts, knocking on doors, shouting trick or treat to ask for candy. However, not everyone knows the legend of Jack-o'-lantern, a cursed spirit who only appears on Halloween night to take revenge on those who dare to tease his fate. One Halloween night, in the festive spirit, the Lewis family decided to throw a big party at their house. Their house was located on an isolated hill overlooking the entire village. The Lewis family did not believe in old legends. They laughed off the warnings from their neighbors not to make jack-o'-lanterns that were too similar to the legend of Jack. Anna Lewis, a 16-year-old girl, is famous in her school for her mischievous and somewhat arrogant personality. When she heard about the legend of Jack-o'-lantern, she was not afraid and decided to carve a jack-o'-lantern herself to tease her friends. Anna created a jack-o'-lantern with a scary face, slanted eyes, and a sly smile, just like the legend described. "Hey, if Jack is real, come and find me." Anna laughed loudly as she lit the candle inside the pumpkin and placed it on the windowsill. The Lewis family Halloween party was in full swing. Laughter and music filled the air. While everyone was having a good time, no one noticed that the candle in Anna's jack-o'-lantern began to burn brighter, the fire inside glowing redder than usual. A gentle breeze began to blow around the house, colder even though the weather had not changed. Anna was standing talking with her friends when suddenly she heard a knock on the door. She signaled for everyone to be quiet so they could hear better. The knock came again, louder and more urgent. "Who's knocking at this hour?" Anna frowned in confusion. No one at the party thought to check, assuming it was just a bunch of naughty kids. But when Anna opened the door, there was no one there. Only the light from the jack-o'-lantern illuminated the empty street. A cold wind suddenly rushed in from outside, making Anna shiver. She closed the door, feeling uncomfortable and a little confused. At that moment, the music in the house suddenly stopped. The lights in the living room flickered, then went out. Everyone looked at each other, confused, not understanding what was happening. Maybe the power went out, Anna guessed, but no one could explain why the lights in the whole village were still on while only their house was dark. Amidst the sudden silence, a strange noise came from the window. A shadow appeared in the dim light of the jack-o'-lantern. The shadow seemed to move, growing larger, slowly approaching the house. "There's someone out there," someone shouted, pointing toward the window. Anna ran out to check, but saw no one. She turned back to her friends, but she began to feel scared. Suddenly, the candle in the jack-o'-lantern went out. At the same time, the front door flew open with a loud screech, causing everyone at the party to scream in horror. Anna tried to close the door, but it was as if it was blocked by an invisible force. The shadow in front of the door was now clearer, a blurry figure with a glowing jack-o'-lantern above its head. It was Jack, the cursed spirit returning to find the one who had offended him. "No way," Anna screamed, trying to run away. She rushed into the house, but Jack's footsteps kept getting closer. Every door in the house slammed shut. Anna's friends screamed in panic, unable to find a way out. Jack stopped in the middle of the living room, his fiery eyes fixed on Anna. "You called me, and I came." His voice seemed to echo from the underworld, deep and cold. "You will never escape my curse." Anna tried to run, but the fire from Jack's jack-o'-lantern spread throughout the room, engulfing everything. Jack's eerie laughter echoed in the smoky, burning air. The next morning, Maplewood Village awoke to a gloomy atmosphere. No one had seen or heard about the party at the Lewis house. When the villagers arrived at the house on the hill, they found only a pile of ashes and the broken pieces of an extinguished jack-o'-lantern. The curse of jack-o'-lantern was once again spread, reminding everyone that on Halloween night, no one should challenge Jack's ghost. Maplewood Village became more cautious from then on. Jack-o'-lanterns were still lit on Halloween night, but no one dared to make Jack's face anymore. The story takes place in the village of Sleepy Hollow, a small, rural area nestled along the Hudson River in New York. This place is known for its peacefulness and mysterious beauty, with dense forests, calm rivers, and ancient houses. But what is more special are the legends and ghost stories that the residents here tell each other. And the most famous legend is that of the headless horseman. According to folklore, the headless horseman is the ghost of a German mercenary killed during the American Revolution. He lost his head in battle, and since then his spirit has roamed Sleepy Hollow, searching for his missing head. On dark nights, the horseman has been seen galloping through the woods at breakneck speed. holding a glowing pumpkin in place of his head. Anyone who encounters him has met a terrible fate. The narrator is Ichabod Crane, a schoolteacher from Connecticut, who has just arrived in Sleepy Hollow to teach. Ichabod is a tall, lanky man with rugged shoulders and a long neck. Despite his odd appearance, however, Ichabod is a gifted talker, especially when it comes to ghost stories. He enjoys hearing and telling stories about the supernatural, and the legend of the headless horseman intrigues him greatly. Ichabod quickly settled into life in Sleepy Hollow. In addition to his teaching job, he led the church choir and frequently helped out in the village. He lived in the homes of the locals and received hearty meals from the families, making him a very welcome presence in the village. Among those Ichabod takes an interest in is Katrina Van Tassel, the only daughter of a wealthy family in the area. Katrina is a beautiful young woman and the heiress to the largest farm in Sleepy Hollow. Her family's wealth attracts the attention of many young men in the area, including Ichabod. However, Ichabod is not the only one pursuing Katrina. His formidable opponent is Brom Bones, a strong and reckless young man, known for his bravery and daring. Brom and Ichabod are two completely opposite personalities. While Ichabod is fragile, intelligent, and cautious, Brom is always ready to use strength and recklessness to solve problems. The competition between Ichabod and Brom for Katrina's heart becomes increasingly tense, especially as Ichabod becomes overconfident in his charms. One particular night, the Van Tassel family throws a big party at their farm. Ichabod dresses up in his best clothes, hoping to impress Katrina and win her affection. The party is a riot of music, and horror stories are told all night long. As the night wore on, Ichabod, as usual, was drawn into the ghost stories of the residents of Sleepy Hollow. They told of ghosts, mysterious phenomena in the village, and of course, the story of the headless horseman. Ichabod listened with a strange interest, but had no idea that night, he would have a direct encounter with the very demon he had only heard about. After the feast, Ichabod decided to ride home. That night, the moon was dim, the forest was strangely quiet, and everything seemed to be waiting for something terrible to happen. On the way home, as he passed through a dense forest, Ichabod began to feel uneasy. The air was stuffy, and in the darkness, he heard the pounding of horses' hooves behind him. When Ichabod turned around, he saw a huge black figure riding after him. It was a tall horseman, but the most terrifying thing was that the horseman had no head. Instead, he held a glowing pumpkin in his hand. The headless horseman. Ichabod urged his horse into a gallop, his hooves pounding behind him. He raced through the narrow streets, trying to escape the dark figure that was chasing him. His mind was filled with fear and the haunting tales he had heard. Finally, when they reached the bridge near the old church, which was believed to be impassable by the horsemen, Ichabod hoped this would be a safe stop. But as he turned around, the headless horseman threw the pumpkin straight at Ichabod. The pumpkin hit him hard on the head, sending him tumbling to the ground. All was dark. The next morning, the villagers found Ichabod's hat lying on the ground near the bridge, but there was no trace of him. A smashed pumpkin lay nearby. Ichabod had disappeared, leaving no trace behind. Some speculated that he had been taken by the headless horseman, while others said he had become so frightened that he had fled Sleepy Hollow. Since then, the legend of Ichabod and the headless horseman has continued to haunt, becoming part of the mystical history of Sleepy Hollow. Brombones later married Katrina, and whenever he heard about Ichabod's encounter with the headless horseman, he would always smirk mysteriously. Everyone knew that, whatever the truth, Sleepy Hollow would always be a village, haunted by horrors, and the ghost of the headless horseman would continue to roam the dark nights. The main character of the story is a nameless man who once had a normal, happy life and loved animals. He married a gentlewoman, and the two lived in a small house where they raised many animals. Among them, his favorite animal was Pluto, a large, intelligent, and very loyal black cat. Pluto was always by his side, and he loved it with all his heart. However, this peace did not last forever. As time passed, the man began to change. Affected by excessive drinking, his personality gradually became irritable, violent, and cruel. He often argued with his wife, tortured the animals in the house, and even began to alienate himself. Pluto, once his best friend, became the target of his irrational anger. One night, after getting drunk, the man returned home and saw Pluto. The black cat accidentally scratched his hand when he pulled it hard. Caught up in the anger and cruelty boiling inside him, he pulled out a dagger and viciously stabbed Pluto straight into the eye. Pluto was in pain and ran away, but could not escape his tragic fate. The next day, when his anger subsided, he felt remorse, but the cruelty in him won over his reason. After a while, Pluto disappeared. The man did not bother to look for the cat and was even relieved that he no longer had to face the reproachful eyes of his close friend. However, a terrible event occurred not long after that. His house was completely burned down in a huge fire. He and his wife were lucky to escape, but everything they owned was reduced to ashes. In the rubble, he discovered a wall that was still standing. On its scorched surface was a bizarre image of a cat with a rope hanging around its neck. A feeling of horror and obsession began to invade his mind. Even though he knew it was just a coincidence, he could not escape the haunting image of Pluto. The image of that deadly cat seemed to follow him, a constant reminder of the crime he had committed. A few months later, while out drinking, he spotted another black cat in the bar. This one looked exactly like Pluto, except for a small white spot on its chest. Fascinated by the resemblance, he decided to take the cat home. The cat quickly became attached to him, and its gentleness made him feel somewhat at ease. However, after a while, the presence of the new cat began to make him feel uneasy and fearful. This cat, like Pluto, always followed him, but its eyes, especially the white mark on its chest, made him unable to escape the creepy feeling. He realized that the white mark seemed to have the shape of a noose, reminiscent of how he killed Pluto. The guilt and obsession flared up again, making him increasingly tense and unstable. One night, in a fit of uncontrollable rage, he decided to kill this new cat. However, as he picked up the axe, his wife suddenly walked in and tried to stop him. In a fit of madness, he turned around and smashed the axe into his wife's head, killing her instantly. Terrified by his actions, he immediately tried to cover up his crime. After thinking frantically, he decided to hide his wife's body in the wall of the cellar. He carefully rebuilt the wall, making sure not to leave any traces. No one suspected his wife's disappearance, and he was relieved that he had not been discovered. The cat was also gone, which made him feel even safer. But the following days were not pleasant. He could not escape the fear and the feeling of being haunted. He was constantly worried that his crime would be discovered. The fear grew like a never-ending nightmare. Everything seemed to be fine until the police came to the house to investigate the disappearance of his wife. Confident that no one would discover the body, he was comfortable letting the police search the entire house. However, as they descended into the basement, he felt a growing unease. In a fit of smugness, he tapped the wall where his wife's body was hidden, boasting to the police about how sturdy the wall was. As soon as he hit the wall, a strange, terrifying scream came from inside. The scream seemed to come from the underworld, echoing throughout the basement, causing everyone to freeze. The police immediately broke down the wall, and inside, they found his wife's body along with a black cat sitting on top of her, its eyes glowing in the darkness. The truth is revealed, and the man cannot escape his fate. The black cat has become a witness to the crime and also the ultimate avenger. His fate is sealed by his obsession with Pluto, the cat who has returned from the dead to demand justice. The story ends with the protagonist's madness as a dark lesson in sin and its consequences, with a tragic ending that he himself has created. The story begins on a cold autumn afternoon when Sarah and Mark decided to go to an antique shop on the outskirts of town to look for decorations for their new home. They both love antiques, and finding items of historical value always excites them. After walking around the shop for a while, Sarah's eyes were suddenly drawn to a large antique mirror in the corner of the room, covered in dust, but still exuding a mysterious and magical aura. The mirror was framed in intricately carved oak, with intricate patterns that seemed to have been handcrafted centuries ago. The glass was slightly opaque, reflecting the faint light from the shop window. Despite the antique and somewhat intimidating appearance of the mirror, Sarah was fascinated. She couldn't take her eyes off it, feeling something pulling her. Mark, although not interested in the mirror, agreed to buy it upon seeing his wife's fascination. The two happily took the mirror home and placed it in the hallway near the living room. As soon as the mirror was placed in place, the atmosphere in the house seemed to change, becoming a little colder, even though the temperature outside was still warm. Sarah, still fascinated by the mirror, began to look at herself in it often. At first, everything seemed normal. However, soon, she began to notice strange things. Every time Sarah looked in the mirror, she felt like she was no longer alone. Her reflection seemed unnaturally distorted, and at times she swore she saw shadowy figures moving behind her. She felt a chill run down her spine whenever she was near the mirror. Sarah began to have trouble sleeping, and she had recurring dreams of an abandoned house where ghostly whispers could be heard coming from the walls. One night, while Mark was working late at the office, Sarah sat alone in the living room. She was drawn to the mirror again, unable to resist moving closer to it. This time, when Sarah looked into the mirror, the face she saw was no longer her own. Instead, another face appeared, that of a strange woman with pale skin, empty eyes, and long flowing hair. The woman in the mirror smiled hauntingly, and Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Sarah screamed and fell to the floor. When Mark returned home, he found his wife huddled in the corner of the room, shaking. Sarah told him about the strange things that happened, but Mark just dismissed her as tired and stressed. He tried to reassure her that it was all her imagination and that the mirror was just a harmless object. When Mark returned home, he found his wife huddled in the corner of the room shaking. Sarah told him about the strange things that happened, but Mark just dismissed her as tired and stressed. He tried to reassure her that it was all her imagination and that the mirror was just a harmless object. That night, neither of them could sleep. Sarah kept dreaming about the strange woman in the mirror, but this time the dream became more vivid. She found herself standing in an old room, and the mirror was in the middle of the room. The mysterious woman appeared, pointed at her, and said in a cold voice, "You will never escape from this place."
"I'll never let you go. Never."
Sarah woke up in a sweat. She realized that she had to find out about the mirror's origins if she was to escape this nightmare. Together with Mark, Sarah went to the antique shop to ask about the mirror's history. The shop owner, an older man, became tense when he heard about the mirror. He explains that the mirror once belonged to a woman named Eliza, who lived in the 19th century. Eliza was rumored to be a witch who was brutally murdered by villagers on suspicion of witchcraft. Before her death, Eliza cursed the mirror, turning it into a portal to connect her world with the world of the living. Eliza has sworn that her spirit will live forever in the mirror and drag whoever possesses it into an endless nightmare. Sarah and Mark realize that they have been trapped by Eliza's curse, and if they do not quickly find a way to break the curse, they will be haunted forever by this vengeful spirit. Determined to destroy the mirror, Mark and Sarah took it out of the house and smashed it into pieces. But as soon as the mirror broke, a piercing scream rang out and darkness enveloped the area. From the shards, a dark figure emerged. It was Eliza, her spirit now free. But instead of disappearing, Eliza turned to Sarah with a sinister smile and disappeared into the night. Sarah and Mark moved out of the house, but it seemed they were never truly free from the curse. Sarah still had frequent dreams of Eliza's face, always standing there in the mirrors she passed, as a reminder that Eliza's spirit would never leave them alone. The mirror was destroyed, but the nightmares continued. If you like my story, please like and subscribe to receive future stories.